And are you seeing people coming in?
Yeah, I have been earlier.
Have you been at bigger?
I have.
Are
Are we on?
Yes, we are now ready, Sarah.
All right, perfect. Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Hadd. I'm the Vice Chair of the Land Use Review Board. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Thank you so much for having us here today. I'd like to have our board introduce yourselves and perhaps we can start. Kirsten.
My name is Kirsten Sultan. I'm from Lincoln. I'm like Sarah said, thanks for having us.
I neglected. I'm from St. Albans.
I'm Brooke Dingham. I'm from Randolph.
I'm Alex Weinhagen, another of the 5 board members. I live in Burlington.
And Janet, can you?
Yes, I am Janet Burley, the chair. However, I have been under the weather and so am unfortunately not able to be with you in person today. Bear with me as my voice is very strained. Thank you. Oh, and I live in Winhall.
Well, thank you all. So a little bit about introductions and explanation of the pre-application process. I'm going to tag team here with Alex, who is our board designee for the Mount Ascutney Regional Plan Review. So this is part of the Act 181 process, whereas all regional plans are supposed to come to the Land Use Review Board for a pre-application and an application. Pre-application process is meant to be a little bit more informal, where we're able to share ideas and advise. We went on a site visit this morning. And for those of you that attended with us, you know that we said this is more about a show, not necessarily tell. Invite you back here so that anything that you wish to share on the record, you can share here on the record. So we have an agenda to get through today. We do have some time for questions from the public. We want to get through a presentation, questions from board members, and then questions from state partner agencies. I'm not sure if we have some here today, and then also for the public. So with that, Alex, would you like to say a little bit more about the pre-application process? And
yeah, for sure. So again, thanks for being here. And I just want to take a quick step back. We are the Land Use Review Board. We're a state agency. Our principal role is to administer the state's land use development program, which is the Act 250 permitting program. But in 2024, when the legislature modified that program, they also gave us the authority and responsibility to review regional plans. There are 11 regional plans that cover different areas all of Vermont. And those plans are not written by us. Those plans are written by the regional planning commissions that work directly with municipalities and communities. And so the real work is done by them. And our job is to make sure that the plans that they produce meet certain statutory requirements. And that's never been the case in Vermont until now. Prior to now, regional planning commissions did a great job, but there was not another level of oversight looking over their shoulder to make sure that their plans met state statutory requirements. And so the change to the law in 2024 sought to provide that level of oversight, and that's what the Land Use Review Board is doing. So just to clarify that we're here to hear more about the plan in its draft version. The Regional Planning Commission is in the process of finishing up that plan, but they haven't held their public hearings yet, and they will. And it's through their public hearings that public input will be collected and the plan will be revised potentially to reflect actionable suggestions that the public makes. Our job at this pre-application meeting is to, like I said, understand what the draft plan looks like. But we're also welcoming public comment too, with the understanding that we don't write it. We just make sure it meets these standards that are outlined in state statute. So I expect that Jason will explain when the public hearings are planned for this particular plan, and those are out into the future. Once the Regional Planning Commission has finalized the plan after considering public input, they will come back to us and we will have a more formal hearing to review the final plan and then issue a decision on it. We did go on a site visit this morning, and I think I want to make sure that we enter some observations from that site visit into the record. But I think it makes sense first to hear from the regional commission about what this plan is doing and some of the particular areas that it's covering. And then we can sort of take a step back and talk about what we saw when we were out there this morning at a few of those communities. So without further ado, Jason, maybe you could introduce yourself and your staff and then tell us something about your plan.
Sure. My name is Jason Rasmussen, and I don't know who I should direct myself to, but I'm the executive director of Mount Ascutney Regional Commission. And with me here, Kelly Appleton and Martha Harrison, who are some of the folks who helped write this plan. I'm listening to your comments, so if you have comments today, I'm definitely paying attention to what those are, and we'll be taking those into consideration. We're going to be today, like they said, is the pre-application review of this board. We're going to, I imagine they're going to ask us for some tweaks to our plan based on this. We're going to go back and make some changes. And we have to have two public hearings, at least two public hearings, in the next 6 months. And the plan is to submit a final application review to this board by August. We will see how the time goes. We may have more changes and it maybe takes a little bit longer, but that's generally the process. So we thought that we would walk through. So we're primarily focusing the conversation today on the proposed tier 1B areas. So that's where neighborhood designation benefits would apply. And that's also where the Act 250 exemptions. There's questions on other stuff. We're more than happy to talk through that. So to do that, I think Kellen's going to walk us through this online map so we can turn layers on and off and explore things as there are questions or concerns. And I'll, between the three of us, we'll talk through sort of why we're proposing what we're proposing. And I think there's some folks from our towns who might want to chime in on that conversation as well. So that's sort of what we're thinking of doing.
Great. So just table setting for everybody. The way we have the agenda structured, we want to give the regional commission time to make their presentation. Then we'll have the board ask questions and grill them. And after that, we'll open it up and take comments and questions from all of you in the audience.
So why don't we start with Chester? If you want to zoom into in Chester there. So we have a
And just to orient us, the Mount Ascutney region is southern Windsor County, right?
right. So we serve a 10 town area in southern Windsor County, but not Weston. So generally speaking, it's those towns on the map there. So everything from Windsor over to Reading, Ludlow, down to Andover and Springfield. That's our general area. And we're going to talk about the bigger towns primarily here today. So in Chester, there's a legacy village center and a legacy neighborhood development area surrounding it. And so we are proposing those areas as the tier 1B areas in Chester. Kellen, did you want to sort of orient us a little bit on the map?
Sure. Yeah. So to zoom out a little bit, this is a map of the region. It's colored according to the future land use types, categories that are prescribed by state statute. I think, like Jason was saying, the thing that we want to focus on mostly today is these tier 1B areas, which are places that we are proposing Act 250 be exempted from Act 250 for the purpose of building housing. And so that's what we're going to zoom in on today. In general, those correspond to places that are surrounding existing village centers and downtowns, and specifically have access to municipal water and municipal sewer. So during the Chester, this is the Chester Village Center in magenta here in the middle. See, it's on Main Street here. You've got Vermont Route 11 that comes in this way, and 103 down this way. And then in pink here is the proposed planned growth area. So this would be the area which is tier 1B, and that corresponds pretty closely to the existing neighborhood development area in Chester as previously approved. So legacy neighborhood development area there. If here, I can throw this on. We can see those areas in green are areas of existing sidewalk, so mainly the core of the village, and then up through to the Stone Village in here has existing sidewalks. And then we can also see on this layer, this is what corresponds to existing water and sewer areas. Places in blue are water, purple is both water and sewer, and red is just sewer.
And I just chime in and just say that the town has they finished a feasibility study for sidewalk extensions down to the high school, which is on the southern, the bottom of the picture there, which is also where there's two very good housing opportunity sites that the town housing commission is looking to do make a development happen in both of those lots.
Any questions on Chester before we move on to Ludlow? Now we have period for questions afterwards as well, so.
I have some questions, but they're more general. So
We'll take them when we get to the
Yeah.
end of the, yeah.
Great.
Move right along.
Sweet, so
Is it appropriate for the town to chime in now, or do you want them to chime in later in terms of their thoughts on this?
Good question. I think it probably makes sense to do that now as a part of this tour. But let's keep it just to town officials who might want to add some flavor to what we're seeing on the map. And then if there are general public comments, we can take that afterwards. So is there anyone from Chester here who'd like to speak?
Yes, my name is Sue Quinn. I'm the Planning Commission Chair and the Zoning Administrator for Chester. I'm also a member of the Housing Commission, and we've worked very hard and very diligently with the folks in our town and regional planning to get this Tier 1B area in place. There are some numerous properties that the Housing Commission is looking at that are either very close to or on water and sewer that we're trying to target for additional housing. And as Jason said, even though the southern part of the map, is lacking a few things, the town is working very hard to put the processes in place to extend the walkable neighborhood south through sidewalk projects. And there's some land down there that we feel could be a perfect opportunity, town-owned land, perfect opportunity for some housing. So I'm really here just to say we're a huge supporter of this. Jason and gang, thank you so much for helping us sort of get this mapped out, and we're looking forward to it.
Thanks, Steve.
Yes.
All right, let's move on to your next community.
Sweet. So we're gonna move northwest here. We're gonna go into town and village of Ludlow. So this is Ludlow Village Center, again in magenta here, and the proposed village area around it. This proposed village area stays pretty tight around the village of Ludlow and in areas that have access to both municipal water and sewer. It does not extend up into the sort of Okemo area up here that's in this resource-based recreation green. But it corresponds to the sort of Main Street area and then a little bit along Vermont 100 to the extent of sidewalks down through here. And then in this residential neighborhood, Quiet Street, Pleasant Street sort of extension area down here to the southeast. And again, all of this has access to municipal water and for the most part sidewalks, or if not sidewalks, then quiet residential streets as well. Yeah.
So I just kind of reemphasize it's a legacy village center, and it's a new proposed village area surrounding it. And there's a lot of flood zone through there. And so part of the thinking is where can we encourage housing growth where it's high and dry? And so that's sort of what we're looking at. And Aaron is here from the town village. I don't know if you want to add anything to that?
Sure. My name is Erin Ladd. I'm the Director of Planning and Zoning for the Town and Village of Ludlow. We also have worked very closely with the Ascutney Regional Commission, particularly Martha and Kellen. Significant community outreach was done. Our select board and our village trustees have both signed off on the Tier 1B designation, and we are very, very excited about it. We would love to get more housing for populations that are working within the town outside of it, and really activating our village center despite experiencing the catastrophic flood that we had in 2023. I've been working closely with the floodplain managers as well. We are very excited about this legislation and seeing it proceed. So thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. And just so everybody's clear, so I'm clear, the darker purple in the middle is the village, proposed village center area, future land use type. The pink is the surrounding village area, future land use type. And that sort of cross hatching is the approximate area of the flood hazard zone and river corridor area.
The places in crosshatch are areas that are either within the FEMA special flood hazard area or 100-year flood, or within the river corridor easement. Yeah.
Great. And can you zoom out to the entire town of Ludlow so that I can see the context?
Is that visible?
It is to me. The parcel lines make it a little chunky. Could you turn those off?
I believe so. Oh man, I might have left those on there.
That's okay. If they need to stay on, they can stay on.
I think they might need to stay on.
Okay, that's all right. So again, just so I've got the context right, we've got that purple area, which is now somewhat invisible where the village is.
Yep.
The pink area, which I can see a little bit now on the screen. Yep.
Yeah.
And then as we come away from that, the yellow that's rural general.
That's the rural general.
Which is, more sort of rural residential. And then that light mint color, mint green, that's the special recreational future land use type that encompasses the Okemo resort.
That's right. Yes.
And the darker green is the rural conservation areas, right?
So up on the mountain to the west there, that darker green, that tends to be either larger plots of land with intact forest habitat or state-owned land that isn't being leased to the resort currently.
Okay.
Something Ludlow that makes Ludlow a little bit different than some of our other towns that you're talking about, the sort of rural general area. In a lot of the towns that we are talking about and planning for, kind of the village area / village center corresponds to areas of small parcels and places with municipal water or sewer. Ludlow's is actually, we're constraining that area to areas that we think make sense for growth and for exemption, but you can see that there's these areas just to the south of our proposed village area that are small rural residential, a lot of small lots. That's all on municipal sewer. Up on the mountain, also a bunch of small lots, also on municipal sewer that you could make some case for. But kind of constricting Ludlow to the center of the village is what we're kind of looking at right now.
And Aaron, that's consistent with the community's vision for where you want to potentially see growth, yes?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
And then the last color that I just want to make sure everybody has context for, if you can zoom out again, Kellen.
Absolutely.
There's a different color of pinky purple right there. You want to tell us what that is?
Sure. Yeah. So this is the enterprise / industrial future land use category, and this corresponds to basically the extent of the existing talc mine in Ludlow. So this is an area of resource extraction that's seen some fairly intensive industrial use. It seems like it's going to continue to be there. So it's not rural land per se, but it's also not an area that we would designate for growth.
Great. Okay, I need to do a quick technical fix here so I can see more of the screen. Hold on before you move on to the next community.
Sure.
Did any other board members have a question about Ludlow before we move on?
I was wondering if I could just ask about the mapping. You have the Tier 1B area excludes identified flood hazard and fluvial erosion areas, except those areas containing pre-existing development and suitable for infill.
Can you speak more loudly, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, what I'm would like to inquire about is how to interpret the overlay of the flood hazard area in relation to the Tier 1B area. Because the information we received indicated that, that the flood hazard area and fluvial erosion area is not part of the 1B area unless it's suitable for infill kind of development. So I just wanted to be sure that I was reading the maps properly in that regard. Have the overlays been changed, like to incorporate infill areas that have been determined to be appropriate? Or are we just looking at taking the flood hazard area out of the Tier 1B?
Jason, you want?
The latter, I believe. Just recently, both the village and the town have adopted river corridor bylaws, so I guess we could go at it differently, but the intent was to exclude them from the planned growth area.
This is an area I've been trying to embrace and understand a little bit better, like between the underlying PGA versus then the Tier 1B.
Yeah.
So there are river corridor regs as well.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, it is trying to mirror what statute's talking about. So in Title 24, 43, 48A, under the village area language, it talks about unless the municipality has adopted flood hazard and river corridor bylaws, which in this case they very recently did. The area excludes those things, and so we wrote it to exclude those areas.
But to be clear, the map shows those areas as part of the Tier 1B village area and village center area, but with cross-hatching to show what portions of those have flood issues. So I think I understand what Brooke's question is, because we've had this conversation in other meetings.
Yeah.
You're portraying this to mean we're mapping it as the pink as village area, but it's not really village area because it's also overlaid with flood hazard.
Well, it's the future land use category remains village area. Whether or not that falls under the Tier 1B activity exemptions, I think is a different question. I think we have taken the approach to map the underlying future land use category and then map the flood hazard category layers on top of that, knowing that flood hazard is not something that we specifically are mapping. So if that changes and it's determined that something is no longer in that area or that expands, then the Tier 1B status should change along with that.
Alex, Janet would like to speak.
Go ahead, Janet.
Well, we had this conversation, as Alex mentioned in other meetings, and unfortunately, the statutory language is not, it's contradictory, or it's different for different land use categories and for Tier 1B. And I think the language for the PGA, the planned growth areas, requires that you not map the areas as planned growth areas unless they are infill areas. But for the village areas and for Tier 1B, it's okay to map them that way. So I don't know if that is clarifying or not, but and we could get some clarification from the legislature on this in the coming weeks or not. But the idea is that you only want to see development in these areas in infill areas, and you cannot even include the area if it's not infill in the planned growth area. I don't know if that helps.
It helps me think about it a little bit, Janet. I think in the Ludlow case, we're not talking about planned growth area at all. We're talking about village center and village area. And so I think Brooke's question is a good one. Maybe, Kellen, you could turn on the Tier 1B layer so we can see that you are in fact proposing all of this area as Tier 1B, including the flood hazard area.
That's, yes, let me make that a little cleaner. Yeah, that sort of silver hatching is what we are proposing as the Tier 1B area currently. And that does include the areas that fall on into the special flood hazard and river corridor areas based on that sort of infill development.
Yeah, so Brooke, the way I read this plan or this particular map was that there are flood hazard areas and that occupy a significant chunk of Ludlow's village center and village area, but that they are all being proposed for tier 1B because they are infill areas and because the community has those regulations. But we can talk more about that later.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think we as a board have spent quite a bit of time on this. I think that we should proceed with the next area. We can talk about this particularity at a future meeting.
But let me make the technological switch that I need. Hold on just a moment. Yeah.
While you're doing that, I just want to say the river corridor piece of it is very often what we see is there are flood hazard regs, but not that additional river corridor, which, as you ably explained, both are required unless it's the infill only situation. So thank you for clarifying that. That was very useful.
Was there another municipality on your site visit that you'd mentioned that had recently adopted?
I go through my head. Ludlow adopted, West Windsor has them as well. In Reading, right now, we're not asking for tier 1B for Reading, but that may be coming. They also have, river corridor bylaws. Flooding and river corridor bylaws.
That's great because that gives the option of which one you want to go in.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Let's move along.
Sure. So we'll take a journey southeast here. Go to Springfield. So one of two tier 1B areas proposed in the municipality of Springfield. This is the sort of Springfield downtown planned growth area. So you can see in here in the middle is in this dark purple, that is the existing legacy downtown area with a slight modification to add a couple of existing mixed-use buildings over here on the southeast corner. And then and also adding the state offices to that downtown center. And then zooming out a little bit, we've got this, again, in the sort of darker pink, this is the planned growth area for Springfield, corresponding to mostly the existing high density built up area surrounding the downtown Springfield. All of this has access to municipal water, municipal sewer, and sidewalks or quiet or complete streets in here as well. And again, Springfield has a fairly extensive network of municipal water and municipal sewer, and continuing up River Street this way towards North Springfield and extending down Clinton towards the Connecticut River here. But we're not trying to put everything that has municipal water and sewer into that planned growth area and that tier 1B area. And so this seems to be corresponding to, what the town's vision for growth is and the areas of existing dense development.
Great, and I want to make sure we get our site visit observations from North Springfield. And so can you zoom out to the full town of Springfield?
Absolutely.
And we can see the context.
So this is downtown Springfield, and then my next plan was to zoom into North Springfield here, which is up in the northwest of Springfield, at this sort of corner here, and that's a new proposed village center and a new proposed village area that we would propose as a separate activity exemption area, tier 1B area.
Could you actually zoom in on North?
Absolutely, yeah. So this is that. Again, this magenta is the proposed village center. It's sort of a tight cluster of civic and commercial buildings mixed with residential uses. This is surrounding the sort of general store there and the church, the post office. And then this lighter pink is the proposed village area, which corresponds to some smaller subdivision area, existing growth. Most of this has sidewalks existing, as we talked about and also observed today. Adjacent to the village area is this enterprise area that we're talking about. This is the North Springfield Industrial Park. And in this orange here and here, this is transition/infill. These are areas that are perhaps ready for some additional growth and infill, but are not being proposed for tier 1B status. Then this purple up to the north, this is the Springfield half of the Harkness Airport here as well. And again, this has access to water and sewer municipally, and sidewalks and quiet streets.
So I want to make sure we get our site visit observations into the record, and North Springfield was one of our site visits this morning. So Scott Pickup, the Springfield town manager, was nice enough to meet us there and encourage us to buy sandwiches, which we did at JC's, and told us a little bit about, you know, what was going on. We did drive through the area that Kellen mentioned, and as far as the industrial park on the western side, and drove a little ways into that. Any particular reflections or observations that the two of you remember from our visit there?
I had a clarifying question.
Okay.
Off of Church Street in the village area, is that that's the Enterprise, is there a quarry there? I was trying to discern.
Sorry,
what that was.
where
It's off
specifically?
of the end of Church Street. It doesn't have an address on it, but it's partially in the village area, partially, I think, in Enterprise.
Okay, no, I thought you're joking. No,
If you turn on the ortho photos, you can sort of see it's one of the larger parcels back there.
Like down in this area here.
Correct.
Jason, I'm not actually quite certain
There-
about that. I can pull up.
There could be, Scott, are you in? Is there's a quarry back there, right?
Nothing active currently, there has been in the past.
So,
It looks like it was partially in the village area, partially not.
Right. It's fairly large, and I think only a portion of it was actually ever quarried. The rest of it has been sort of left.
you're talking about this other larger parcel area over here. that's in the
Yeah,
village area?
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Don't believe that there's any current development or buildings on that parcel currently. But it is relatively large and flat and outside of the flood hazard areas, which, as we can observe here, are relatively extensive in North Springfield's existing development.
I didn't have any other specific observations from North Springfield. Appreciated the visit. So
I mean, I
You
guess
can-
maybe
you
I
can
could
move
add,
on.
we saw the graded school building and just, you know, the village area, we stopped there and there's a post office.
right.
Yeah, the
Alex?
proposed village center.
Go ahead, Janet.
Sorry, just to clarify, the parcel that Sarah was referring to does look like it is at least a defunct quarry. And it sounds like someone from the town confirmed that it is not an active quarry.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I just add that the proposed new village center is really, the J.C.'s Market is in the center, smack dab in the center of it. And it's really bounded on the east by the post office and on the west by that church. It's relatively small.
Excellent. All right. Go ahead, Callan.
Cool.
What's next?
Should we go to Windsor or West Windsor?
Let's go to West Windsor.
Let's go to West Windsor. Great. So this is West Windsor. It's west of Windsor. This is we visited this today on our site visit as well. This is the proposed Brownsville Village Center and Village area, which corresponds to the legacy village center, unchanged from previous approvals. And it encompasses the sort of smaller parcels along Vermont 44, close within walking distance of the village center, and a decent bit of the buildup around the Mount Ascutney Outdoors Center and the ski center on the south side of the brook there. And this also this all has access to municipal sewer, and these developments and parcels on the south side of this pink are have access to municipal water as well. And then, yes, again, that light mint green, that corresponds to recreation resource area, the Mount Ascutney ski area, and the Windsor or West Windsor Town Forest there. And then zooming out a little bit, that is the only proposed Tier 1B area in West Windsor. Yeah.
So I just clarify for the sake of the conversation that the former Ascutney Mountain Resort is no longer what it used to be. It's now community owned, run by Ascutney Outdoors. And there's adjacent town forest where there's 30 or something miles of mountain bike trails. And so what used to be was a very separate resort from the village. But now we're really connecting them and it's really becoming one. And I think the part of the thought behind this is to incorporate a Better Connections project that was completed last year to really make the village and the resort area, residential area, one. And Al Keeler is here. He's a member of the West Windsor Housing Commission, former planning commissioner. Al,
Just before you move on, Janet, do you have a question or do you want to wait till the end?
Sorry, I think I forgot to put my hand down earlier.
Yeah, thank you.
so Al, do you
Yeah, I'll
want
just
to?
make a couple of comments. Well, last year, in 2025, the planning commission focused on affordable homes. We did an affordable home study. Part of that resulted in identifying 4 properties with high potential. 3 of those are located in what we're proposing for the village area. And if successful and we reach the full potential, we have the opportunity for adding 60 affordable homes within that area. In addition, by having this designation, we'll have a greater opportunity to extend our sewer and water system throughout that village area.
Just to further that thought, the community finished a wastewater feasibility study looking at Seams Road.
Yeah,
Right up in there.
Road, right there.
And then sort of the Skyhawk area. There's sort of 2 smaller neighborhoods that are underserved with sewer, so that they'd like to extend into those areas. That's what Al was referring to.
Some of our observations from the site visit, we did, I think the zoning administrator, town administrator, and at least one member of the housing commission were there and present, and I think we heard about the recent wastewater endeavors in terms of taking over, and also the newly formed housing commission and some of the, I guess, redevelopment around the defunct ski area. So Kirsten, what else were? some of the
We
things?
drove up into the ski area, housing unit, condominium kind of neighborhoods. And we're told that a significant percentage now of those housing units are owner occupied, year-round primary residence kind of situation, as opposed to just short-term rentals. So the use of those has changed over time. So,
Yeah. And Matt Frederick, who's the town administrator, provided us with some written documentation that we will scan and get into our database. And Al, who is here, provided us with some information on the housing side of the coin, which we will also scan and get into our database. For those of you in the public, all of these submissions that come in from the regional commission are available for review on our land use review board website and in our database for regional plan review. And so we will put any additional items that we receive hard copy there as well. So it's all publicly accessible. And if anyone has any issues accessing any of that, please contact me and I'll make sure that I can point you in the right direction.
Janet has her hand up. Sorry. Janet, go ahead.
Thank you. Since I was not on the site visit, Kirsten mentioned that a lot of the, ski development or the residential development around the ski area is now owner occupied. But I noticed that there are some large parcels that look like they have, condominiums on them, and they are remaining in the resource-based recreation category. And I just wonder if you talked about what the plans are for the former ski area and why that is still in the recreation-based resource or the resource-based recreation category. Thank you.
So, I guess I'm not honestly remembering it. Maybe Al can remember, a little bit, but I think some of the condos are more condos, truly at this point in time. And I think that's probably why we kept them in that category. And yet the outdoor recreation is really what still happens there. It's just at a much more reduced scale than when it was a commercial ski resort, but it's still an active ski area. There, sledding, and there's, mountain biking in the summer. There's a lot of events in the summer, concerts and things like that. So, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it's a good question. I was under the impression that it was all part of the village area, and now that Janet's raised it, I'm looking at the map on a separate viewer with the aerial photo, and I can see the condos that she's referring to.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting point. So I think, is it Deb Shearer?
Yep. Yeah, is my.
Yeah, go ahead,
Good.
Deb. You have something to
live.
add for us.
I honestly, when you brought that up, my first thought was, oops, that was an oversight, because the condos, maybe it's because they can't be developed anymore. But I honestly, that's a really good question, and it's kind of an odd thing because it's not resource-based recreation in those two condo units that you're talking about. Oh, 3 condo units, actually, now that I see.
Yeah, something for the regional commission and us both to look into. I just assumed those were the ski in, ski out ones. So, they were really part of the ski area still.
No. The ski area is really not a ski area anymore. It's basically a volunteer. Ascutney Outdoors is a nonprofit, and it's totally volunteer run, basically, with a tubing hill. So it's really community based. I would not consider it a resort exactly.
I hear you, Deb. I was being cheeky. Sorry.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
All right, do we have anything else on West?
Martha.
Just on that one parcel, it's 18 acres and it's already got 72 units on it, so that may be why there's no really room for additional development on that parcel.
Right.
That may be.
Thanks, Martha, for the additional color and information.
I had a question about the sewer, and when you were saying that is going to be expanded to some different areas out there. And if you're talking about building more in the area where there's sewer, I believe that sewer is Windsor sewer. So I would like to know how much of our sewer is allotted to that.
Matt, the town administrator, was speaking to us about that, and from memory, I believe there's a certain allotment that the town of Windsor has given West Windsor. I forget the number, but I think they're roughly at 50% of that current allotment. So there's ample capacity that West Windsor could add to flow, if you will.
So you don't actually know how much of our Windsor sewer is allotted there.
So the town administrator said 130,000 gallons per day. That's the number. Yep.
Is the state going to relinquish their demand on our sewer system?
So
Don't know
what
the
I'm-
answer to that question.
So I'm going to ask, just because we have 2 minutes after this, that when you speak up and please state your name before you speak, just so we have it in record and we can not misattribute to you anything that somebody else might say, so.
Good point. So that was Martha Harrison, right, that
Yeah.
spoke, and then I didn't get your name.
Diana Cushing.
Diana Cushing, and
Jim Cushing.
thanks, Diana, Jim.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
And
All right, we better move on or we won't get through the
I was
rest.
trying to say, we're only about halfway through and we need to make up some time here, but.
Sure, yeah. So yeah, we can go over to the Windsor downtown, here, where we are. Again, this, sort of dark purple is the existing legacy, Windsor downtown. A little harder to see the flood hazard in there, but you can see that that's sort of, east of 5 is a lot of that is within the sort of flood hazard or river corridor area for the Connecticut River. And then the darker pink here is the proposed planned growth area, which kind of extends in 2 wings. The north wing along State Street and County Road up to the hospital along following the existing sidewalk infrastructure. And then the sort of south wing along the existing residential development on Vermont 44 down to the existing recreation areas following again the sidewalk infrastructure there. This area all has access to municipal water and sewer and sidewalk infrastructure. Little larger context for Windsor. Windsor has kind of again, sort of more extensive water and sewer than we are mapping in the Tier 1B area. You can see that there's this sort of subdivision down here on south of downtown along Route 5. And then this sort of area as north on Route 5 out of the downtown. These all are existing residential subdivisions that have access to water and sewer, but we are mapping as either rural general or sort of transition infill. Farther north out of that along the Heartland border is we're mapping this as an enterprise area. This is the sort of business park, Harpoon, Simon Pierce sort of spot here along the river just outside of the flood hazard area and to the west of the railroad right of way. Then going up County Road, following the sewer infrastructure, we have this proposed new village area on the site of the former correctional facility. This again is another spot that we looked at on our site visit today. This has access to Windsor's sewer system and has its own on-site water system. As well, and has the current development from the former prison site on there. This pink area is that sort of is the proposed village area. It's nestled in this rural conservation area, and we're proposing something about 60 acres in there. The village area. Not all of that would be developable, but trying to hold parcels together and sneak in this little hook here is the water tower that is up there and trying to keep that intact in the same area. Otherwise, yes, this large conservation piece here and this piece on Mount Ascutney, and then most of the rest of Windsor, we're proposing as rural agricultural and forestry.
And so, the drive that we took from this site to the former Windsor, the former prison site, was right up that road where the planned growth area is.
Yes,
right?
we went up hunt to county. This right here, this parcel is the hospital.
Okay.
And that's the end of the planned growth area. We went beyond that underneath the interstate. This is where I think in this sort of river corridor flood hazard right here, this is where people were remarking that it feels a little ravine-esque, and that's in the conservation area. And then we popped out here onto State Farm. That's where we drove today.
Yeah, so my observations from that trip, primarily the former prison site, because we spent a fair amount of time there, and met some neighbors as well who happened to be there, was that we saw it from below, right from the gates. And then we were encouraged to go up top by the water tower and see it from above. And that, I felt like that gave us a really good picture of the overall sort of development footprint of the prison and the solar trackers, as well as the context of those surrounding conservation areas, which are pretty interesting, how it all comes down into that bowl area where the prison is. We noted, and some neighbors noted for us, the meadows that are up top by the water tower, and the fact that the area is quite popular as a birding hotspot for a variety of species. And we noted, I think it was noted, the cost that the state is spending on an annual basis to maintain that site, somewhere in the $250,000 level per year, just to keep the site from crumbling, I guess. And Tom Kennedy, longtime member of the Regional Commission, met us there and provided us with a packet of information, several pages, some of the history of the site, and a report to the legislature, which we will be making available on our website, part of the database for this this site visit and this review. Did you two have any other observations from the proposed village area land use?
We'll add that the former correctional facilities site also features some agricultural type structures and quite a number of outbuildings, I guess I would say. Like it's sort of a campus of sorts, right, of different structures dispersed in the area. It's not just sort of like one big building.
Anything from you, Sarah, for the site visit?
I think it was a good perspective from up top to see what was within the perimeter versus what was within this parcel. So what was actually in the enclosure versus what was contained within the parcel. I'm happy to, do you have any other observations?
No, just you sparked me remembering that I believe the state's ownership is 118 acres. And that, as Kellen mentioned, the area here in pink as a proposed new village area was 60 or so
Approximately 60
acres. So it's just a portion of that, that sort of old prison complex.
Alex, you have a question in the back?
Well, no, Janet has her hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Janet.
So, again, I'm sorry I couldn't make it to see this, but, what does the town plan have envisioned for that site? Did you talk about that at all?
We didn't, so now we will.
Okay.
So Cliff McNaughton is here from the planning commission, but I will note that this has changed over the years. It used to be a conservation area in the previous town plans. It's now rural designation. But the town is, like, tomorrow, next week, going to be starting the town plan update. So it's a little older, and the plan was done before the housing crisis, I would say. So it does probably need some refreshing. But Cliff, I don't know, do you want to add anything to that?
At this point, he just said, Cliff McNaughton, I'm the chair of the planning commission. At this point, we are in the process of kind of digesting all the information that's happened of 181. We're trying to update our zoning bylaws to conform to the new state regulations. That has been the focus of the planning commission, to get us at least prepared to the 1B designation that got approved by the select board to be able to qualify for that with the zoning laws. So that's been our first priority. Shortly after we're finished with that step, which there will be public hearings on the zoning side of things, the next step would be to start on the town plan itself, revising our town plan. And at that point in time, the property that's up by the prison area at this point is not being actually focused on because that would be something we would deal with when we come to the town plan side to say, what do we want to do with this area? Right now, we're only dealing with what we currently have. I mean, I think the options for the Pleasant site, as you can see, are bring a lot of emotion and a lot of people who have very strong opinions of what should be done. So I think we need to have a lot of meetings and go through what the possibilities are, what we want with it. It's my understanding that this designation just opens the potential that if we wanted to use it for something other than what it's currently designated at, that it would be available for us to do. It doesn't mean we're doing anything. And the other thing is that it's owned by the state. So as of right now, it doesn't matter what we think, to be completely blunt about it. It's the state's control. I'm a little curious that we could do this without the state wanting to do it. As far as designating that as a 1B, that came to my mind, because they're the property owners. So at this point, and I think there's also been some misunderstandings in certainly on my point, looking at the size of the map. Originally, it was talked about that it was inside the current footprint of the actual prison area. That's larger than that. And I know there's myself and other people were saying, well, that's not really kind of what the impression was. So at this point, I think that's an area that we're going to continue to work on, and we need to work closely with the Regional Planning Commission, because I don't know that that area is actually something that's going to end up being what we're seeing on the map. And we need to get some more input on that side to determine what we're going to do with it.
Gotcha.
Now, to address the rest of it, I think we're all very much encouraged about the downtown and the rest of the area. I think the commission is also going to look into talking about possibly expanding some other 1B area that's on County Road that has the sewer, that right now is not really necessarily included, because there's some areas along there, some other property. The Norwich Solar Company that owns the solar farm that's up there is interested in doing some development, and that would be approximately across from the prison area. We want to make sure that we're not going to do anything that's going to limit the ability to maybe do a planned neighborhood towards that side, as opposed to focusing so much on the prison side. But I think we need to keep those options open along there too. So that's something we'll talk more with. But inside the footprint of the town, as you can see, we have a lot of issues with flooding in Windsor and floods in Windsor for potential areas that we can develop. And if you take away all those areas that are not available to us actually to do, I think we do have some concerns, and we'll get to this, I'm sure, about the target number of housing that's expected for Windsor to find a place to put them. And at this point, even looking at the map that we have, I have some questions as to whether there's even a place to put those number of units. So I think for Windsor, we're very much in the process of trying to figure out what this means and what we can do with it, take advantage of what we need to.
Appreciate the perspective from the planning commission level. I have some specific thoughts about the prison site, but I'm going to hold those until we get through the rest of the site visit, and then we can talk more about some of the sticky points. So can you keep going?
Sure.
Next community.
So I think for the sake of time, what I'd like to do, because for the agenda is we're supposed to get through this, then the board has questions, state partners, and then public. I'd like to keep on going for the sake of time. So if people can just hold their questions at this point, we will get to them. Just let's get through the rest of the presentation.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. I think something else that we had talked about today was in Felchville in Reading, which is a village in the southeastern corner of Reading here. We're proposing, this is a legacy village center, and we're proposing a pretty small village area extension to the northwest there. I think, as we were talking about in the car earlier, it seems unclear whether or not that will be proposed as Tier 1B by the time that we get to our final application, but for right now it isn't. And honestly, that's all of our tier 1B areas or potential tier 1B areas. Give a quick commentary on some of the towns we have not yet talked about. Andover in the far southwest, this is entirely within rural categories. They don't have any existing village centers. They're not proposing any village centers. That's all in the 3 rural categories. Baltimore, the same thing. And then Cavendish has 2 existing village centers in the village centers of Cavendish and Proctorsville. But because of their lack of specifically zoning within the town, they're not eligible for tier 1B. So we are proposing some transition infill areas around those, but not proposing any Act 250 exemptions in the town so far. Similar in Weathersfield, we drove through the town of Perkinsville here. This is the existing legacy village center, but we're not proposing any tier 1B around it or for the village center itself due to lack of infrastructure. And the same in the Ascutney village. We had considered whether or not this should be a village area, but are currently not proposing any tier 1B status for Ascutney due to lack of infrastructure and an expired town plan. I don't know. That kind of takes us through each of the towns of the region. Be happy to answer more questions, or if Jason, you've got have anything else you'd like to add, and I've just kind of rapid fired through the rest of the towns. But
Thank you.
yeah, figured we were on time crunch, so.
I could elaborate, but if you have questions, let's leave it at that.
I do, at least a couple, but the regional plan is a lot more than just the future land use map. So we've been asking questions just a little bit in between. So I just want to give you an opportunity to speak to the overall plan. I'm not asking you to walk through the whole thing by any means. We have it, we're reading it, but is there anything you'd like to highlight about the plan itself aside from the mapping?
So there are really 3 elements that really had the most changes: housing, land use, and energy. So those are, primary focus areas for substantive changes to our plan. Certainly housing targets are a big part of it. We haven't talked about that yet. So in our housing chapter, we included housing targets for each town. So we came up with way to look at population, infrastructure capacity, and future land use category as ways to break down our housing targets. When we started to look at this, and Martha in particular, it just made a lot more sense as far as we were concerned to look at, what towns have realistic large amounts of capacity for water and sewer as part of that metric. So Windsor and Springfield get bigger numbers as a result of that because they have a lot of capacity. But yeah, so there are targets in there. For example, for Windsor, we have a low and a high range for 2 different year periods. So for 2025 to 2030, Windsor's 379 on the low end or 559 on the high end, and that's townwide. But when we were mapping these land use areas, we were thinking, okay, more than half of that needs to be within the planned growth areas, village areas. So we were doing that. The one commentary I'm going to make is for Windsor, because of a relatively larger number of homes, because of some constraints, flood and brownfield related constraints that are prominent in parts of downtown. We thought, the prison site made some sense in terms of that. It would allow for some new housing in an area where there's not real significant flood constraints. We're basing our thoughts initially on this legislatively funded master plan that was finished last year. And one of the things Tom Kennedy was talking to us about earlier during the site visit was, realistically, if you look at the constraint analysis, there's like 20, maybe 22 acres of developable area there. It's not huge. And so in our minds, that's in our map, but it's not very clear to understand. So there's that. We've had some conversations with V-Trans and others. But there has been a concern about, okay, so if you're gonna have Act 250 exemptions, those are gonna be projects that V-Trans isn't reviewing, Act 250 is not reviewing. How's that gonna go? And there's some concern about a lack of transportation impact fees and some other factors. So we've included in our plan, and what we want to do is essentially help our towns. So there's 5, maybe 6 towns that are asking for tier 1B. So we think there's a lot of help that we could provide them in terms of development review, but also just making sure maybe they have traffic impact study language in their zoning. Consider things like capital planning, impact fee ordinance, local impact fee ordinances, and so forth. We want to basically provide those that level of review and those level of thought that would have for any of those sorts of projects. Again, because V-Trans and Act 250 aren't going to be reviewing those, so that's included.
Alex, I know that you probably have more questions. Janet has had her hand raised, but Janet, your hand's down. Are you fine, Janet, with Alex proceeding with his questions? I'll get to you.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, okay,
Keep going.
so, the housing targets, which, are now up on screen, the state has prepared these low and high targets for the 2030, time horizon and the 2050 time horizon. Some, regional planning commissions have decided to split the difference and create their own mid version, and those are the targets that they are promulgating. Can you just tell me, like, what are you all thinking? Is it both? Is it one? What are your thoughts?
At the moment, we thought we would present it in the same way that the state did. We could consider that. But at this point, I think it's helpful to have a range.
Right.
And,
I'm not saying it needs to be one way or the other. I'm just trying to get clarity on what your proposal is, and your proposal is to show the range.
yes, for
Okay.
different reasons. Yeah, I mean, so as a step back, we worked with 2 other regional planning commissions, 2 Rivers and Upper Valley, Lake Sunapee, to do what we call the Keys to the Valley initiative a couple of years ago. We came up with some targets, and they proved to be not always helpful. And so we're trying to, it's more of a fuzzy line than a clear straight line. So I think we like the idea that it's more of a range and not we need 418 houses. I think it's more helpful to have a range, and we're shooting for it, but it's going to be really hard to meet targets.
Okay, my other question was about, one of the statutory goals for plans is to, and it's relatively new, is to address the extent to which, environmental benefits and burdens are distributed across the region, and whether, particularly, disadvantaged communities are being unduly burdened by brownfield sites or places that you're targeting for industrial development, and there could be a host of other ways that you sort of slice that. How did you think through that? I didn't see a lot of that in the plan as I read it, so what did I miss, and how did you think through that?
It was a major thought in our minds and in our outreach processes. We did a lot of outreach. We've done more than we've probably done collectively over the last 20 years for this one. And it wasn't easy to necessarily reach all of those demographic groups. We ended up probably largely relying on our partners and social service agencies and those sorts of connections. So we were looking at Springfield has a Working Communities Challenge effort going on. We have a housing coalition in the Springfield area. Those sorts of partners we really relied on heavily. Springfield Supportive Housing, those folks to really help us to understand, not just the housing targets, but everything, like how are we impacting everybody? It's not an easy question to answer. We did some data analysis and, but at the end of the day, it seems like, the cost of housing is huge. The cost of transportation is huge. And, we're just trying to make sure folks have, access to those things as much as they can. And, it does relate back to some other policies. For Springfield has a new, microtransit service. Windsor's had one for a few years, things like that. And so I think a lot of the thought process may not be explicit, perhaps. We did add some language on that. I think it's in the implementation chapter. But it really permeates the whole document.
Did you have any thoughts about how to identify environmental justice focused populations? We've talked with other regions about the real difficulty in even understanding where those populations are, because the statutory definitions are so broad that it appears that the entire region is that. And we know that's not the case. Did you have any light bulbs go on, or ways to identify where those sensitive populations are?
No, honestly, no. We had the same issue as most other regional planning commissions did. I mean, there's some obvious neighborhoods where there's clusters of lower income folks, and so that sort of jumps to the forefront. And of course, many of those neighborhoods are in flood zones, and so some of the efforts like what Windsor's doing, where they're doing some pilot projects to raise up some of the homes in those neighborhoods to be above flood elevation, like that's great. So I think, but no silver bullets.
Okay. And I think I just have two more. On the housing targets, I saw a lot in your housing chapter about the affordability issue, which is great because it's a real issue. But it wasn't clear to me that even reading through the Keys to the Valley plan, that there were specific targets for affordable housing within these larger housing targets, like at least 20% of these overall housing targets should be available to folks earning below 80 or 100% of the median income for the region. Did I miss that? And if I did, like, what are you thinking in terms of those targets? I ask because part of me is concerned with all of the regions in putting forward these targets, that they're there to help judge our success and progress over time. And I'm from Chittenden County. A lot of development happens there, and that region has been tracking housing targets for a while, with affordable too, and they've been coming close to their overall housing targets and have been failing on the affordable side of that coin terribly.
Yep.
And if we don't have measurements or targets that we're shooting for affordable unit production, we might never know 8 years from now, when we get to review your plan again, whether we made progress on that. And so do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, maybe it isn't as clear as it should be. Yeah, so roughly a third of our households are cost burden, so they pay more than 30% on households. So there's a number. We need to address those folks, whether that's a livable wage issue, whether it's a cheaper house issue, you name it. The intent is that I think these housing targets should be either low income or missing middle type, homes. And what does that mean? But I think generally speaking, we really need smaller, more efficient, like single level type homes for retirees, people who want to age in place. That would free up their old big house for a family to move in. We need low income opportunities. We need a lot of workforce housing. And so maybe we need some numbers there, but it's hard to put a number on it.
Yeah, I want to give you credit. The plan makes it very clear what your intentions are on that front, and the level of households that are cost burdened. So it's like the data is all in there. It's just that these are nice, clean tables, right? That tell you, we want to, in 2050, we want Windsor to produce over 1,000 new units of housing between now and then. And there just isn't another column that says half of those should be available to people earning below a certain amount. That's all. So not trying to push you on it, just trying to make sure I understand what your thinking was. So then my last question, promise, is the prison one. So Kellen, could you put the map back up?
Sure.
It's an interesting concept. It was one of the first things that jumped out at me when I started looking at the future land use maps, because my understanding is that these village areas, as distinguished from village center areas or downtown center areas, is that statutorily they have to be connected to a center, that they can't sort of exist out on their own. But maybe you have a different understanding of how that works, and that's why you proposed it. That's why I wanted to ask you that.
Well, as with a lot of things, statute's not always clear.
That is true.
So we're looking at, in particular, Title 24, Section 4348A, for the village area language. It does say, and I'll quote this part of it, these areas include the traditional settlement area or a proposed new settlement area. And then it goes on to say some other things that complicate the matter. But how do you have a new settlement area surrounding a village center? And so, you know, if this idea is even a good one, and if we keep it, you know, how would you have a village center in the middle of nowhere
Right.
where there is no historic anything?
Right, how do you create something new, because the village center use, which is
Right.
different from the village area
Right.
use, requires that civic component and existing sort of fabric that doesn't exist
Right.
yet. Gotcha.
So, you know, our thinking is this is unique. Statute wasn't written thinking about this kind of a thing. We think this is a new settlement area. And we think village area made sense, but if you tell us otherwise, we'll change it.
And I'm not, I'm just asking questions. The board will discuss this further at our upcoming meetings and then give you some feedback.
I think just to add on to that though, in terms of the statute and contemplating, is what the statute did contemplate is that you could create your own special use district area, which is how we saw some other areas address, for instance, in Shannon County, the Ethan Allen firing range, Camp Johnson, federally owned lands, and then the airport. They created as their own because it didn't really fit in any of the different categories. And so I did want to just bring that to your attention is that there is that option that you can sort of define. It doesn't get you a tier 1A or 1, but it's something that could be a placeholder for the future. So that's just within that 4348A area is that you can create or delineate a separate area if you needed to.
I had that same thought, Sarah, like, I wonder if this is one of those examples of something that didn't fit the categories laid out in the statute, and so you get to use the wild card category, which is essentially what we're talking about. But right now, you've identified this as a tier 1B area. So, yeah, we're gonna give it a particular thorough looking at because of that.
Okay.
Can I jump on that? I'm gonna plead your case for you.
So Janet, I see have your hand up, but we're gonna let Brooke go first.
So I'm gonna plead your case for you because, going back to the statute in terms of village areas and I appreciate, Alex's, interpretation. However, the actual statutory language says that village areas are the areas including traditional settlement areas or a proposed new settlement area. And this is important. It says typically composed of a cohesive mix of residential, civic, et cetera. And at the very end, it says, for residents who live within and surrounding the core. I don't think that's mandatory language. So I think that there is not a statutory prohibition to what I'm hearing proposed.
And we'll talk more about that amongst ourselves and thrash it out and get you some real feedback later, but that's good point. I don't know that we've seen any examples like this yet, so good for you for bringing up a new situation we haven't yet seen.
All right, I'd like to call on Janet.
So I think we also have to look at not just the village area description and statute, but also the descriptions in the community investment program statute and the tier 1B descriptions in Title 10. So I think there are 3 areas of statute to consider together here. And as Alex is saying, we will discuss this further. I think I am more skeptical of this designation at this point, and it also sounds like the planning isn't there yet. So, maybe a transition infill is a more appropriate future land use category at this point. And I think my impression is that if it's going to be a new settlement area, that you could establish the core of it as a center and therefore surround it with a little bit more village, surround it with village area around it. But yeah, I think statute is confusing on this because I think it sort of inadvertently said that village areas include centers when in fact they are separate land use categories on the future land use map. And it was maybe just a little bit sloppy in terms of how the final Act 181 language went out. But I'm pretty skeptical of this particular proposed future land use area for that area.
Janet, do you have any other questions that you'd like to pose at this time?
I do have some notes if you give me a minute, if you want to go to somebody else first.
Well, Brooke, do you want to, we'll ping back to you or?
I'm good.
All right, then I'll ping over to Kirsten.
Okay, I want to talk a little bit more about flood hazard and river corridor, and I know we've already talked about it, and it's a complex area of the statute. So I want to focus in on, so for the towns that don't have river corridor and flood hazard bylaws, tell me how you think this will be sort of implemented, because I would anticipate that in order to limit development activity to the infill, that would require some more granular examination of what specific areas qualify for infill development than has been done with this mapping. But I just want to make sure we're sort of on the same page as far as understanding how that implementation would occur.
So do you want to specifically talk to the PGA areas? Or is there
it's just
a
kind of,
particular place?
it's a more general question as far as, it could be village area where there's no municipal bylaws and it's mapped this way, there's an overlay. I'm hearing it said that it's not really meant to be, I think, part of, say, the village area, that the village area would omit those.
No.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding how it will be implemented. Like if someone can speak to that.
I think to just correct that first, and then maybe before we have the answer, Janet wants to speak, but I think with PGA areas, if they don't have river corridor and flood hazard, it needs to be omitted. With the other areas, they can have it in. It's the tier 1B more specifically that becomes problematic within if there aren't local bylaws.
Well, yeah, I mean, village area, it's the same standard if they're tier 1B or not. So that's what I was trying to kind of keep it.
Janet, do you want to speak on that?
Just a second. Do I have my? Sorry, is my microphone on? Yeah.
Actually interested in hearing the answer to Kirsten's question, because I too feel like there are certain areas that don't have bylaws that cover this that can still be included as long as they're appropriate infill areas. And you're the experts as to, how these maps were put together and to what extent you looked at whether infill was appropriate in particular areas that were mapped as village areas. So were you thinking at that level? Were your communities thinking at that level?
So a couple attempts to answer that. So the mapping methodology that Regional Planning Commissions together created talks about showing these as overlays. So just from a mapping stylistic point of view, we're showing them as overlays. As I'm understanding statute, so for village areas, it says, and I don't want to say all this, but unless the municipality has adopted flood hazard and river corridor bylaws, the area excludes identified flood hazard and river corridors, except those areas containing pre-existing development. If we map that, that'd be a fairly lengthy exercise.
Right.
Yes. And so we didn't do that. We simply showed them as overlays at this point in time.
That's helpful.
Let me just speak to that if you don't mind. Because I've been struggling trying to understand this and, we are doing this plan by plan, being confronted with factual scenarios and trying to figure out how this works. And for me to say have an overlay and development's not going to happen there, basically. And I know that there's this provision for infill only, but unless you folks were to go through an actual exercise of mapping where infill would be allowed or wouldn't be allowed, I don't understand how one would develop that property anyway. Because if you don't have the flood hazard regulations to be implemented, it's like we're asking you to do the applications ahead of time. We're asking you to draw these lines based on this infill only, which typically occurs through an application process to say, hey, if you have the regulations, I have an engineer who can demonstrate that I can do more than infill because it's not going to affect anyone. And you have a whole bunch of stuff you have to approve. But the infill only would be, here's my application. I'm in between two buildings. This is an appropriate place for infill. And there's a regulatory body that decides that application. So my discomfort with all of this, and I think you just hit the nail on the head, is, are we asking for that process to happen ahead as a planning function as opposed to a regulatory function of people coming and saying, I want to do something with my property? So that is the conceptual difficulty that I am having in terms of how do you accomplish this from a planning perspective?
So thank you, because that brings us back full circle to my question, which I'm trying to understand. Well, how will the implementation occur on a project basis? And communities would, through their zoning administrator, what have you, help ensure that this is understood, that you can do infill development, and here's the A&R rule that establishes, the limits of that.
Yeah, this is difficult,
Yeah.
honestly, to answer. So, you could look at the floodway, for example. Any brand new development has to show generally no rise, right? So you could infill in there, but you got to prove no rise. Well, you can't map that. Anything in the flood hazard area, you can build wherever, if you have the model regs, you just have to elevate, right? When it comes to the river corridor bylaws, that's where I think this really comes into play. You could try to tweak the map so that you shrink the river corridor boundary to the backside of the existing buildings where they exist in close enough proximity to each other, and that's another exercise. But there's no way you can map the river shadow effect, if you're familiar with these rules. Really, really difficult. So I don't know how we would even begin to try to do that.
So Janet has had her hand up for a really long time, so I'd like to go to Janet, please.
So
Janet?
I think that the statutory construction around all this is very unhelpful. And I think, at some point, this board will probably, if it doesn't happen without our recommendation, recommend some changes. But I think what ideally is that you don't see any development in these areas unless that municipality has adequate regulations for flood hazard and river corridor. And I think that, maybe that needs to be explicitly clarified in statute, because it's not right now. And so my sort of impression is that we should be, we should only be allowing a development in river corridors and flood hazard areas when there are regulations in place at the municipal level. If a municipality does not have flood hazard regulations and it is an area of infill, it's still not a very smart idea to build it without building it floodproof, right? Even if that municipality doesn't have regulations. So I think that statute needs to be clarified here. I think that common sense is that if a municipality doesn't have those regulations, then, perhaps nobody would get funding from a bank to build in a flood hazard if it weren't built to flood proofing standards. But I think it's an area that needs clarification in statute, and until and if that happens, I think, I don't know if we as a board can encourage that you don't, that your policy is that you don't allow development in flood hazard areas, even if it's infill, if it's not built to flood proofing standards. I don't know if that's, it's
All right.
something that we'll have to talk about as a board and perhaps with our legal team. But I think it's a clumsy area within statute that needs to be addressed.
All right, thank you, Janet, and I know it's exceedingly hard for you to talk right now, but I would like to get back to, I know you had a list of questions that you have, and just a reminder to keep us on track. We're going to get through the board questions, and then absolutely we're going to get into public questions. Kirsten, before maybe you can give Janet a breather, and what other questions do you have?
I just have a really quick one about the municipalization of the housing targets. You mentioned population infrastructure and then land use categories. Are you referring to zoning? Are you referring to?
No, our future land use
Okay,
categories.
future
So
land use categories. Okay.
we looked specifically like downtown center, for example. We said, 15% of housing, we're gonna give that a 15% weight. Village center, 10%, plan growth, 45%. So we do have an appendix C that talks about that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I for one was happy to see that you had some rubric for it that was more than just the big communities get more and the little communities get less. We've seen other regions struggle with that, and some do it that way and others try to do it with a more robust rubric like yours. So kudos for me.
All right, Janet, are you ready with your question?
Well, yeah, because I had a question about that. I think the explanation is fairly bare bones. I appreciate the three-pronged factors here, but for instance, for enterprise areas, it's 0% because you don't have any housing there. It's not 0% because the future land use category was of a certain acreage. And so I think there's just a little bit of explanatory detail that's lacking in this section. So that was one of my comments. The one other thing that I had about your land use development policy section in chapter 3 is that there's a couple places where you say you don't want to see cul-de-sacs, and then you show these preferred illustrations of development that show cul-de-sacs. And I think that the preferred patterns that you're showing are appropriate, and that the reasons for the cul-de-sacs have to do with, protecting natural resources rather than exhibiting a suburban style of development. So I think there's a little nuance there that's missing in that conversation as well. For example, if you look on page 3-29, that there's an illustration that shows the preferred pattern of development, showing 3 cul-de-sacs versus another one next to it that doesn't have cul-de-sacs, but that is not the preferred pattern of development because it doesn't cluster and preserve rural qualities. So, and then I had a question about hamlets, because there is a discussion of hamlets on page 3-17, but I don't find any hamlet data in the mapping data that you shared with the board. At least I can't find it on our map viewer. I didn't see it on our little drive-through here today either. Can you clarify what is happening with hamlets?
Sure. So we do have a couple of areas mapped as hamlets. We've been opting to map them as points rather than as a future land use category. And so they haven't been submitted under the same process as the tier 1B polygons and the future land use category polygons. But I can work to get those up and going. To be honest, because they haven't had a statutory implication, it hasn't been something that we've been discussing super robustly. So I can get that data up and running for you.
That's great. If you could submit that to Josh Plaxa in the same way that you submitted the other layers, that would be helpful.
Be super happy to. Thank you.
And then just one quick comment. There are a few areas that need updating that have antiquated references to our program in particular in the first chapter. There's a reference to the land use panel of the Natural Resources Board, which hasn't existed for many, many years. And the Natural Resources Board, of course, was replaced by this board. So I think that needs to be updated. And then there are some references to the Public Service Board instead of the Public Utility Commission. So I think you need to do a sort of find replace on Public Service Board and update that with Public Utility Commission. And that's all I have for now.
All right. A lot of my board members have gone through all the other questions, so I'll ask one with a little bit of a finer point. Aware of all the good work that you've done with the Keys to the Valley, and I think that was the Boston Fed project, and really a huge project, a huge list in terms of identifying needs. So I know that there's other bodies of work, and I think you did a really good job at succinctly putting in here. And just in some of the numbers, it was interesting because particularly with the renter households, Windsor County has a higher income than the state for those in rental. And that sort of is an indicator of a couple of things, potentially, that it might be just nice to hear a little bit more about at some point in terms of, do you have more people that are stuck in renters that would like to be homeowners? Do you have not enough rental units? You know, that's like one of those like sort of like, numbers that could say something. So that's just something that it might be nice to know a little bit more, because I will sort of second what Alex said in terms of, I understand why you did the low and the high and didn't choose and are showing that range. These are tough numbers to talk about. When we were in Addison County, they chose a middle that they created. And just to get to the middle, they're going to have to double their rate for development. And I don't know, I think that's the sort of question I'm getting here is, even to get to the low, do you know what you're going to have to do to your rate of development to get to the low target?
Yeah, we've been stagnant for the last 2 decades. So we need, that's almost close to zero. We've not, other than the last couple of years, we've seen some modest growth. We've been stagnant for 2 decades. So we need to really step it up if we're going to meet these targets.
It might be nice to have a rate.
Yeah.
Just so that that's a discussion point, because right now sitting here, I don't know what that means. And particularly, I think it's helpful for us as we're going around the state and looking at these different regions and saying, wow, Addison County, they had a proposed tier 1B in just about every community. And even with that, they're going to really have to press the accelerator down. It's going to be a big lift for them to get to that mid number. So I think it just all helps us to have numbers to talk about and can bring it home a little bit more in terms of these areas, because as I was looking also at your future land use areas, there are some areas like Windsor where you had a legacy downtown, you chose not to go for all of it for your downtown center. That makes sense when you take a look at the flood hazard maps, that there was some that was legacy downtown that was really all within that flood hazard area. So maybe it doesn't want to be a downtown, maybe is. I think as we talked today at the various different points, and we're looking at that village area, it's more expansive than the village centers to give more opportunities out of those flood corridor areas, flood hazard areas for more of that development to go into. So we're not introducing it within those areas. So, do board members have any other questions or observations? What?
I have one quick question. On that appendix C that you're showing on the screen, there are there's a bar graph and a table at the bottom of the previous page, and it's not indicated whose data that is. Is that the region or is that the state? Just curious to know, and perhaps that should be pointed out. The bar graph right there, yeah, and that right there. That there's no indication of what that data is for. What
Honestly, we'll have
geographic
to get
area?
back to you. It's a good question. I don't recall offhand, but we'll follow up. Clarify.
Thanks.
I would like to say thank you so much. This is a ton of work, and we probably should have started out saying that to begin with. We have three amazing people here who have amazing planning backgrounds. Kirsten and I have more practical implementation backgrounds. I was a practicing attorney with Act 250 for 30 years. And Kirsten was an engineer in private practice and then became a district coordinator with Act 250. So this is our collective trying to assist by giving you recommendations on improvements, but please forgive us if we did not acknowledge this is an amazing amount of work. Thank you very much. We know how difficult this is. We're challenged in trying to make sure that we are being even-handed and making sure that the issues that we observe, we are making sure to share. So this is constructive criticism to improve things and to further vet and think about many of these complicated matters that are it's like putting puzzle pieces together. And it's not a perfect process, but I just want to make sure that this is not coming across as a big negative, because this is a robust effort that you have engaged in, and we hope that we're helpful in that regard.
Yeah, it's not negative at all. No, we appreciate it all, and I would expect the constructive criticism. It's all good. Thank you.
All right. I would like to move on specifically to any questions and comments from state partner agencies. Do we have anybody from state partner agencies in the audience or online? And I apologize, I can't see all of you from my perspective. So please speak up or raise a hand if you're from a state partner agency.
Maybe stop sharing screen so you can see the people.
Yeah. We have a hand raised from Doug Hill. Are you with one of our state partner agencies, sir?
I don't think so.
You're on mute.
No, I do not work for the state.
Already. So I don't believe we have anybody here. So all I'd like to do is move on to the public. And since Doug has his hand raised first, would you like to go?
Yeah, I would. Not related to Windsor, well, a little bit related to Windsor. First of all, our criminal justice system has failed. And I have no idea why we haven't reopened that as a prison up there yet. It's a perfect place for it. The prison firm worked good up there for a number of years to develop something that the state already owns when they have a severe lack of prison space. I think is asinine, but that's beside the point. Now let's get to your land use maps. I'm on the planning commission in the town of Pomfret. The floodplain maps, a woman was talking about floodplain maps earlier. I don't know who drew these up, but I realize we have the ability to smoke marijuana freely in the state of Vermont, and I think they must have smoked a little bit when they did the one in Pomfret, especially on my property. When you say that a local planning commission can draw a line on a map, such as they did on the White River corridor in Sharon and down on Route 14 and brought the river all the way to 14, what people don't realize is if FEMA adopts that mess that was created by somebody, probably at state level, the people that live in those buildings are already low-income people. And to buy flood insurance for something that didn't flood during Irene adds insult to injury. Now, in the town of Pomfret, we have 2-acre zoning. We have had for a number of years. What happens is all this ag forestry land that shows up on your map, according to any information we get, automatically becomes 5-acre zoning.
Mr. Tuttle?
We will not
Can I
accept that in
interrupt for a
Pomfret.
minute? This is Sarah Had from the Land Use Review Board. I apologize, but Pomfret is not within the regional plan that we're reviewing right now. I don't believe. You're not part of the Mountain Ascutney regional plan, so we don't have your map that you're referring to.
Nope, that's fine. The land use review people are on here. I've been to a meeting in Windsor before and we discussed this issue before, but this is statewide. This is a statewide problem. This doesn't just pertain to Windsor or Pomfret or Hyde Park or anything. What I'm trying to tell you is people better look before they pray on this Act 181, and especially the Tier 1B. I printed out the Tier 1B information, and there's so many regulations within that Tier 1B that you have to meet. And then not to give a landowner real good access to a proper hearing through the Act 250, which Act 250s are fast too. I've been through that process in White River.
Mr. Tuttle,
Yep.
I'm going to redirect and ask you if you have any specific questions or comments on the Mount Ascutney regional plan at this time.
Yes, I do. I do not think the land at the prison should be done, anything should be done with it other than a prison. That's my comments on that. That's what it belongs
All right.
as. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And we will have we meet every Monday if you have general comments for us. But we have a room full of people that have all been sitting here and are rather hot at this point because of the room temperature that I'd like to get to. So I apologize, but thank you so much for attending. I'm going to move on to folks in the room. And I know the lady in the back had her hand up way before, so I'd like to.
Paula Robbins, and I was just going to make a quick comment. There's got some property that's in flood zone or power fields and all of that. I think connecting up to the old correctional facility property is an excellent choice. And the maps, I think, only showed the sewer level going to the hospital, when in fact the town sewer goes all the way up to the facility. And it's like Springfield area, or whatever we were calling it, that help connect the two. If the state land is not like a village on its own, it's not usable practically to connect it because there are sewer lines between the two. And I think there's also a sewer line that goes from the town of Windsor out to the mountain in West Windsor, if that is helpful in any way to infill, to be able to allow Windsor to have some growth and on the front end. And what better place to live than a place that has all that wildlife, beautiful, manicured property to do. So not develop it and just keep it concentrated in one area. That's just my comment.
All right, thank you so much. Janet, you have your hand raised. I apologize. I
Yeah.
know that's hard to hear.
Yeah, there was a lot of audio distortion, so I'm hoping somebody can, on the board, can repeat what the salient points were.
I'll just repeat that Paula Robbins was saying about the prison property and with all the brownfields, flood hazard area, et cetera, that the prison could be well used and perhaps connected to the downtown in some way if we needed that for the future land use areas. Is that a good sort of succinct?
And that the maps indicate that the sewer line does not extend all the way to that correctional facility property, but that she understands that it does in fact connect. Yeah, the sewer lines do connect to that property, and that's also being acknowledged in the room.
All right, and so I'll just say, apologize, speak up, or if you need to come up to the front of the room, but who would like to go next? Gentleman in the front.
My name is Robert Slocum. I'm a Windsor resident. And I'm favorably impressed with all the work that Jason Rasmussen and the Ascutney Regional Commission have done. But I think that primary purpose of this meeting is to talk about what should be 1B, Tier 1B, and what should be excluded. My opinion is that the prison farmland, 118 acres, has implementation of Tier 1B on that property is this rushed implementation of Tier 1B is outpacing specific information that you need to know. And that includes that, first of all, how could it be considered 1B if the town doesn't own it? Secondly, I thought new zoning laws had to precede 1B designation. Thirdly, the Kennedy Bell report itself in sections B and C has determined that that land, the prison farmland, only a small portion of it might be developable. That's impractical to develop up there, except maybe what's within the fence at the most. And that's 20 acres and not the 100 acres around that. So, and also designating that area as Tier 1B does not take into account the fish and wildlife input, which has not been taken into account. Development up there would adversely impact the wildlife management mission and mandate. And then it also doesn't take into account the fact that there is a bill, H513, that's in the House now that is with the intent to increase the wildlife management area to everything that's not within the fence. And then as far as the current water and sewer hookup, that was designed for 100 prisoners. And before you think about any development up there, you need to know what the actual current flow of water in and sewer out is. It may not be adequate for much development up there. So I'm just saying that there seems to be a rush to implement that whole area as Tier 1B. And I think that might be inappropriate. Now, secondly, I think that there's areas in town that have could be Tier 1B that have been X'd out. And I'm wondering myself, I'm not sure, but I'm wondering if the designation of that as brownfields is based on current information, or is it based on politically hackneyed politics? Because, for instance, somebody spills a bucket of creosote there 50 years ago, and then 20 years later, they dig right there and they say, oh, there's creosote, so everything's brownfields. I just wonder if a current site assessment should be done on those areas that are considered off limits. Because there may be a lot more developable land there than we think. It may be unnecessarily cross-hatched out. A skate park has been built on that area, on the brownfields. Well, how was that accomplished if it's brownfields? So maybe housing could be built similarly downtown. And just to get, I'm waxing hyperbolic, then I'll stop. But Hiroshima and Nagasaki were wiped out by an atomic bomb in 1945. And they're thriving cities. They're thriving cities now. So I would like to see more work done on seeing, reassessing those so-called crosshatched areas. There may be more land for development downtown, and we wouldn't have to consider this pie in the sky type thing of having a new village 2 or 3 miles outside of the village on the prison farm. So that's my 2 cents. Thanks.
All right, thank you so much. So I appreciate, and I'd like to get to everybody, and I'd like people to hold their applause to the end if possible. So, we have the other lady that's patiently sitting in the very back.
I'm Heidi Decker, a resident of West Windsor, and
Come forward, please, if you could, make sure we can hear you. Thank you.
resident of West Windsor and a member of the planning commission. And I just wanted to say, particularly one of the comments that was made about reevaluating this plan in 10 years. I personally believe the numbers for the housing allowance that have been projected or anticipated are extraordinarily optimistic.
Yes.
And I am aware that we want to increase our housing, but I'm also aware of all the other limiting factors. And so I just ask that we reconsider those numbers so that when it is evaluated in 10 years or 8 years, we actually meet a level of success, not, this didn't happen as it should have. Because this is going to be a really hard endeavor for any community. So that was my comment. I don't know if it's really appropriate, but I appreciate all the encouragement for public input and feedback. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much. All right, holding the applause to the end. Gentleman on the side there.
Yes, Hugh Quinn, Town of Chester, zoning administrator. I'm just gonna change the topic a little bit to a point of view about development, planned growth area and flood hazard development. So I know that discussion was had. My feeling is that it shouldn't be handled as a planning exercise. I would rather see the planned growth area include areas in the special flood hazard area and handle it as a regulatory matter on a application by application basis for towns that have zoning bylaws and flood regulations, because that allows me as a zoning administrator with my development review board to figure out whether it makes sense or it doesn't make sense, infill or otherwise. And I think the only thing I'll say lastly is with the overlay approach, if those flood hazard areas change over time, you don't have to go rework your planned growth area maps. So I just want to put that out there as my 2 cents.
Thank you so much. And folks online, if you wish to be heard, just raise your hand. We'll get to you. I think we have a few more folks in the audience. Gentleman in the red flag.
My name is Dave Taft. I'm a Windsor resident. I'm going to talk about the prison prime area, Robert's thing. Well, first I want to thank you guys. You said this is about, you didn't make this plan or anything. You're just trying to make sure that it's legal and falls within the legalities, and I appreciate that. I think we're in a whole ball of mess here. 1,000 potential homes in Windsor. You said you got a low target and a high target. One of my questions is, which probably isn't in your privy, but do they also look at the job opportunities that are around? Because I suppose that their theory is the more housing you have, the housing crisis will get better and prices will go down. If you do any research at all, a development done well is a break-even thing. By the time you get your infrastructure and all of your, what you need, taxes don't go down. If you do it well, they stay the same. The object is add to the tax base. It doesn't lower my taxes. Never will, never has. We don't have 1,000 jobs around. There's not one job in this Windsor area that could support the average cost of a new build anywhere in Windsor. So what are you doing? I get the idea is that we'll have all these houses and more people will come, boy, everything's gonna get better for all of us. It doesn't work that way. Never did, never will. We offer $10,000 for people to come here. All that did is drive people that've been here forever out. It's no more people. We're losing people all the time. It's jobs that they need. Okay, you can work on the internet maybe. Well, maybe, but we still need manual labor. Still need carpenters and things to build these things. We don't have any of that. We've got this big pipe dream in the legislature that does all this stuff. Doesn't make anything better for any of us. My tax bill keeps going up more and more every year, and they keep doing more stuff that I disagree with. But as far as the prison property, I agree with Robert. We don't even own that. The fishing games that the nice guy up there said $250,000. It's $700,000 a year the state puts in to keep the prison farm going with absolutely nothing going on in there. They waste $700,000 a year. And one more thing, that water tower, that's a gravity feed tower. I don't know how much water goes into it or anything, but that's not a town resource. That's the state owns that. There's so much litigation that's going to happen at the prison farm to build one house up there. Somebody else besides the state's got to own it. Either that or the state's got to come in and build all this stuff and be the landlord like Windsor is doing right now.
Alrighty. Checking, maybe in the front.
Okay, I'll stand over here. But I was just.
Your name?
Oh, I'm Deborah Falls. I just happened to look on my computer today, and I may be wrong, so anybody who knows the actual population of Windsor right now, it's about 3,300. And you're proposing making 2,300 units by 2050, which is doubling, not doubling, but 2/3 as much as the population that's already here. Yeah, thank you. You can say that. But it's like, what does that do to the school? What does that do to the streets? What does that do? We don't have, I don't want to say anything bad about the grocery store, but where is the other infrastructure to support that? And the other thing is, I forget the other thing because I'm so nervous being out here.
You're doing fine.
Thank you. It just, I see all this, and when I first heard about it, I just got nervous because we moved here a year and a half ago, and I thought, man, I like this town, and it's got potential. And then all of a sudden, bam, I can't envision. I get nervous just thinking about what are those units? How do they work? How does that change the whole community of what is here now? And I have to say, it's been very stressful trying to figure it out. I tried to go to meetings. I couldn't, really find any information. I go online, to try and figure out what it all means. It just has not been translated to us, the public, how it impacts our lives in our town. That's what I have to say. Oh.
Lady on the side there. And feel free to stay seated.
My name is Diana Cushing, and I just wanted to say that my feelings really deep down and that I wanted to share today are the exact type of things that this lady just said. I was born and brought up in this town, and I love Windsor, and I like what Windsor has. I don't want it to grow by 2/3 and all this. It doesn't even make sense. We don't know for sure where. We don't know what sizes. We don't know what population is going to be buying them. I do know, having been a realtor in this area for over 30 years, that we did do some small developments in this area, which are very nice. And I'd love to see us have a few more of those to come a little at a time and grow a little at a time, and not all of a sudden dump all these more kids than we're ready for in the school. Even though we want more in the school, we need to do it and make sense. And for all of the other things that we have in town, the hospital, I mean, all those things are wonderful, but we don't want to outgrow what we have here. We want to do it and make sense, and we need to look into how much is it going to cost to build these homes, and who's going to be able to afford them, and where are the people going to work? And what's it going to do to our community if we grow by a third or 2/3 in just a matter of a few years? It scares me to death. It's, to me, it's like we're pie in the sky saying, okay, we're gonna build 1,000 houses. But we don't know where, and we don't know how much, and we don't know who's gonna use them or where they're gonna work, or or do we have enough sewer capacity? What do we have for water capacity, and what is the flood, don't really have any of the background information we need to have to go along with the building. And if we would do it in smaller pieces, like what we did on Taylor Drive, what we did years ago up on Juniper Terrace, what we did up on Paradise Drive, what we did off from Route 5, just south of town there. If we would pick and do one or two more of those kind of mid-range homes that people, it would bring people to town if they could afford those homes, who would actually maybe help our tax base. I mean, we have lots of low income housing in Windsor. And I mean, I know it's needed everywhere. We have a lot of it. And that doesn't do anything to help our tax base. All it is more burden for those of us who are here. And with what was just voted in, with our new school budget and all those things that were on the list that we voted in, I mean, just for us, I bet you, based on the information I got from the gentleman in charge of the school board and all that sort of thing, our individual taxes will probably go up over $1,200 this year.
Oh.
And they went up about 3 times that much the year before. And we just keep getting more and more, and we're taking on. Thank God we've been lifted from the weight of having that prison there that we've had to pay for years and years and years. That's cost us money. And now it's gone, and I'm so thankful for it. Some other town, maybe Mr. Tuttle's town, would like to have it. He thinks it's so wonderful. But somebody else needs to take the burden of that off our backs and keep it off.
All right, I'd like to try and get through everybody
I'm
who's been
sorry.
waiting patiently. No, I appreciate all your thoughts. I just know that I have a bunch of hands I haven't gotten to yet. So which one? Plaid shirt in the middle, please.
Me?
Yes.
Again, I don't know if you want me to come up, I can come. I'm Cliff McNaughton, and I'm the chair of the Windsor Planning Commission. And I think from in a couple of interesting perspectives, that the 1B designation, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's based on water sewer capacity of what you can actually do with, because all of the properties have to be hooked to water or sewer. So.
No, that's not correct.
Okay.
So, tier 1B, you can have that, one of the things, water, sewer, water, and then soils.
Okay, so you can have, right, you can have, that's.
Correct, so there's a range.
Thanks for clarifying that.
Sure.
But what's not taken into account is that's our municipal infrastructure, might be a better way to put it. It's kind of focused on that. What it's not focused on is if we actually bring that amount of population on, how do we handle the police department, the schools, and everything else? There's nothing to support how the town's supposed to deal with that. So from my standpoint, I would be answering back to the town saying, okay, we do all of this growth. Now, how do we support it? Well, we have to support it through, and this is the point I think everybody's making. We're going to raise our expenses. We will raise the tax base, but because we're raising expenses, in the end, it's a wash or it could be a net loss The other thing for, I think, perspective, and I need some clarification, these housing numbers we're talking about, that looks like, is that houses, buildings? Are we talking buildings? Or are we talking units that are occupied? That's a
Units.
huge difference.
Units.
That's unit numbers. Okay. Right now, currently in the grand list, because I know everybody's been thinking about this, the Windsortown grand list for residential properties, and that's parcel count. The total parcel count is 1,165. Now, some of those have their duplexes, they may have more. We have the old prison, I forget what it's called, right down on State Street. There's obviously a lot of housing units in that. There's a new one that we built. So that number is the actual buildings and there's more in it. But even if it's, let's run an average of 2 or 3, that's still only bringing us to 3,000 maybe total. And the top number there by 2050 was in the 2000s. My biggest concern is this is not being looked at with enough perspective from the state side. I understand from our planning side that we're dealing with it at one level, but there's a whole bigger level that's not being considered. And I think the thing about redesignating the prison, it's good to bring that opportunity in. I'm open to those ideas. I'm very concerned it's distracting from what we need to do. We need to worry about Windsor's area of what we can work in. And we're getting completely distracted about worrying about what that could be. I want the opportunity there to do something with it. What I don't think anybody in this room wants, maybe some do, for it to turn back into a prison. The state could do that if they wanted to. If we change the designation, for the zoning, it'll make it more difficult and bolster our case for them not to do that. I know we have a vote for a prison over here, but but regardless, the point is we need to, I think in Windsor, we need to focus on our challenges we have. We have the flood zone areas, we have Brownfield. Brownfield isn't that much. Everybody talks about the land from the river up the railroad tracks. That's a panacea. I mean, we just drove that just the other day. And I think you should drive it. You tell me where you're gonna find all these places you can build housing on. There's not that much there. We need to find other areas to expand into. And we need help from the Regional Planning Commission to help us identify more places that we can. Because right now, as a local planning commission, we're having a difficult time doing that. There's a lot of land use that's going on in existing properties. And there's a lot of larger tracts in this town that are owned by businesses that are in Connecticut and other areas. They're private owners. We can't, hopefully we could go to them and say, hey, with 1B now designation, you can do something with this and bring housing in. That's how we need to approach it. So I think what we need to focus on is making the people who own these tracts that could be developed an opportunity and a reason for them to do the development. Once they decide that, it's got to go before the development board. It's not like we're signing something today saying we're going to build a mega apartment complex. That's not it. It's not what's happening. We're talking about trying to find places where we can do housing. Make it affordable for a builder to build. Developers aren't going to come in and do it for nothing. They have to have a reason to do it. And that's what I think this is about. So don't misinterpret what I'm saying. Fully for 1B. I'm just saying, in my mind, the prison farm area is a non-issue right now. If we can designate it whatever we want. Until the state comes to us and say that they're willing to relinquish it, that's when we need this discussion.
All right. Thank you so much. We still have some more hands to get through. And I think yes, blue shirt on the right. Yes, that is you, yes.
Just a quick one, I think. On the Windsor downtown.
Sorry, you're
Tell us who you are.
Thank you, Madam. James Clark, a Windsor resident. On the downtown designation, we've got in Ludlow, we've got the enterprise designation, a light magenta colour.
We have nothing in Windsor other than the Simon Pierce development, which is sort of out of town. Does it make any difference to Windsor if the downtown area includes some enterprise area? Because thinking on the riverside, got a lot of old factories. It's not the biggest part of town. Could be conservation if we really made it, made an effort on it. But does it make any difference how we designate it? With respect, say comparing enterprise value versus downtown.
So the state sets out all these different future land use categories. And enterprise is really supposed to be like more of a single use, like your typical industrial district, whereas downtown has a lot more of a range to it in terms of uses. So good discussion for you and your planning commission to have with the regional planning commission as you move forward here. But there are those specified categories in statute that have limitations, and so you can discuss.
So were you asking if it makes a difference in terms of eligibility for 1D, for instance?
Well, I now see on one of the slides that if you had an enterprise, then you wouldn't be putting properties on it because it's a 0% versus 5 or 10%. But what I was kind of thinking is Windsor better off to have an area there where we've got some derelict factories or almost having them as an enterprise value, so we can get grants to maybe develop it in great jobs.
So
it's the opposite. Having those areas mapped as downtown centers will open up more tax credit opportunities and redevelopment granting opportunities than having it mapped as an enterprise zone. So there's more opportunity if it's actually in a mapped downtown center.
All right, that's my question.
Okay.
Thank you. And that's it.
All right. Next, teal in the back. I apologize, I can just see a teal sleeve.
And then late teal. Michael Quinn, I live in Windsor. My original question was specifically about the new village area up at the closed correctional facility and the grassland, but I might have an extra one. Could you, for that area, the new village at prison and the grassland, could you turn on the soil layer, please?
I don't have are you talking about agricultural soils or the?
Just soils in general, because they're not all agricultural.
The two layers I have access to.
We can do that on our map viewer.
Okay, the reason I ask you, I did look at the soil. And if that new village is going to promote development, housing, I want you to know that those soils are limited for several things. Well, the prison's on prime ag, but that's historic. But the other soils, one's limited because it's shallow to bedrock. The other one's shallow to water table. And there's another one that is interesting in it deteriorates concrete foundation. So I'm not an engineer and I'm not a soil scientist, but I did stay at a hall. No. And so if you could include that in your evaluations and your discussions, because maybe they're just not developed because the soil is not the right kind. And the other one was, I guess, the water supply, the tank, you should check on the security of that, because I've witnessed people tampering with it. I've witnessed them opening up the access points on the roof and putting things in there. I took all the notes and they did what the vehicle was. And then the other thing is down by the railroad tracks and all, that may be part of the Silvio Conti National Wildlife. I don't know how that fits in, but I think it is part of that whole sliver of the wildlife.
All right, well, thank you so much. And I would say that you are in a municipal building, I think with the police station. And so if you're witnessing people vandalizing public water supplies, I'd maybe stop by downstairs on the way out and mention that.
I don't report anything to the police in Windsor anymore.
All right,
Dangerously bad experience.
all right, matter for another time, but gentlemen in the gray vest, please.
My name's Brian Porto, and I just offer not an endorsement of anything, but one small piece of information that I think might be helpful. I've had an opportunity over the past few years to be working on a book that compares how Vermont and New Hampshire deal with a lot of different public policy issues. And one of them is housing. And in the course of that research, which has gone on for several years, that book's almost done now, coming out in August. But I've discovered something that seemed to me to be counterintuitive, and several of you have mentioned this, and so I just want to make this information available to you. Multiple sources have reported and written about the claim that the developing of housing in smaller communities will add substantially to the size of the school population. And the reality is that used to be the case, but it is no longer something that we could rely on or have to worry about necessarily for the reasons that I think we all see around us all the time. Families are a lot smaller than they used to be. So I know New Hampshire, a number of New Hampshire towns were very worried about this, and they tried to encourage senior citizen housing because they were fearful that if they built housing for working families, that they would greatly increase the capacity or the size of the school. And people on the other side of the river hate to be taxed. And they didn't want their taxes to go up, their property taxes for their schools, because in New Hampshire, the towns pay most of the cost of the school. So important thing to keep in mind is perfectly fine to be opposed to developing housing on the old prison site. I mean, frankly, that's my position. But I also think, for all the reasons people cited, but I also just want people to be aware, don't assume that if we build housing in Windsor, we're necessarily going to see the size of the school population explode and our property taxes to support the schools explode. Just because people come to town now, move to town, don't necessarily have 3 or 4 or 5 kids. They may have no kids. They may be an unmarried couple or a married couple without any children. So I just wanted to make that point so that we're working on the basis of accurate information, regardless of how we might feel about one of these issues. Thanks.
Right. Have we gotten through everybody in the room, or have I not been able to see your hands? Gentleman in the back. Here, that's you. That's you.
I'm Dan Jones. I think there was a comment here earlier about the size of the proposed 1B area at the prison site in Windsor, and I think I heard 60 acres mentioned. I don't think it's 60 acres. I think it's the whole area that's being proposed. And if you would look at page 8, you mentioned that Tom Kennedy gave you a report this morning on the site. Page 8 shows an outline of that area. And if you could compare it to what you show on the map here for Windsor, they look very similar. So it's the whole 118 acres, unless you tell me I'm wrong. One reason that that's important is because the town newsletter, Windsor Town Newsletter, this morning that comes out every week, has a top line article suggesting that it's only 23.5 acres at the prison that's being proposed for 1B designation. We're getting misinformation. And I think the town should knock it off. You mentioned that report from the Regional Commission by Tom Kennedy and Emily Bell will be posted on your website.
Yes.
It was sent to you earlier, along with a report from the Department of Fish and Wildlife that proposes moving the boundary between the wildlife management area and the prison down towards the fence. And I request that that report likewise be posted on your website so that it's readily available.
And you're saying we received that report at some point?
Yeah, I sent it to you earlier this week.
We
But
did,
here's
and
hard
it's
for all
on
of
our
you.
database,
Yeah.
Alex.
It's
It is on the
Exhibit 7.
database for the pre-application. So it's part of what's
Great,
available
no,
through our database.
I appreciate Dan bringing it to my attention because I'm leading the board on this and was unaware of it until now. So
Okay.
thank you very much.
Good, thank you.
All right, is there anybody that has not yet had the chance to speak? Yes.
Real quick, I've made most of the points I would want to make. I think that Marv Clausenlandis, sorry. Really critical. Are we talking 20 acres? Are we talking 60 acres? Are we talking 100 and plus acres up there? That needs to be clarified. And my vote is if we're gonna go for this designation, even though we have no control over that area, let's keep it minimal. I'm totally in favor of the overall thrust of the new Act 250. Let's make it easier to develop housing in a responsible way. Let's make it even stronger protections of our natural resources, which is so important in our community and the whole state. That is an argument for 20 acres max and the rest of it natural resources. So that's my vote for that. The other thing, I was previously for, I forget how many years now, on the Windsor Planning Commission. We did a build out study. Jason, you did that.
I remember that.
We overlapped for that. It's on the shelf somewhere. I don't know where, but I remember at the time we did a whole study of with our current regulations at that time, if everything was built out that could be. Jason, you have any idea how many units that was?
I don't remember. That's a long time ago, but
But it was a lot. It was
a lot.
probably at least 1,000, right? 5,
yeah,
at least.
at least.
So it can happen, but as you said so eloquently, we can't just say, build it and they will come. And it's very tempting to say, well, here's big open areas. Let's turn this into a big development. We can fill in with, and especially if we cut back on restrictions. There's already been some changes since my time there. So this could be a multifamily unit. This could have an accessory dwelling. All those kind of things. I'm not worried about having enough housing in Windsor. If we look at those, we don't need to come up with a big development in the middle of the conservation region. It might make sense. I'm not totally opposed to it, but I think that kind of build out study should be part of this, whatever you're submitting and proposing to anybody. Update it. What can we currently do with what we already have? Another quick suggestion. I saw the handout for the site tour. It had an illustration from the Bell. I highly recommend taking that off, not using your website. It shows a lot of development way beyond the 20 acres. And that study was roundly rejected by the Windsor Planning Commission. I didn't hear a single person in town say, yes, we want this. So highly recommend you not use that illustration. It says it's misleading and it sets off
lots of red flags for Windsor residents. Thank you.
All right, so we are at time. However, we still have more people to get through that have not had a chance to speak. I'd like to go to Annette next.
Yes, I pulled up the map viewer and looked at the parcel size for the prison. Actually, it's more than what is mapped as the prospective village center. The total size of the state-owned land is 945 acres.
That includes the wildlife management area, I believe, in that.
It goes, yeah, all the way to the west, but the parcel viewer doesn't break that up. But so just for what it's worth, the state owns 945 acres there.
Understood. Do you have anything else in that?
Not today, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Do we have any other people online? Chuck?
Thank you. My name is Chuck Fenton, and I'm from Heartland, and I'm representing some concerns that the Heartland, town of Heartland has. Heartland is in a different planning district. It's in the Troc district. The planned community that's on County Road only has two methods of egress. One is through downtown Windsor, and the other is through Heartland Four Corners.
I'm going to ask you to hang on for a minute. I can't hear you very well. So I appreciate all the side discussions. We're almost done. If we could just keep it at a minimum right now, so we can get through the last of the people that haven't had a chance to speak yet. I apologize, Mr. Fenton. Please continue.
That's fine. So the other point of egress from that site, which is remote from Windsor's built area, is through Heartland and through Heartland Four Corners, which VTrans has already identified as a point of congestion, and they're going to be doing a study about how to improve it. However, there's already traffic congestion on that road. Those are class 2 roads, County and Brownsville. And I think that when a proposed new village area impacts an adjoining planning district, that there should be more of an effort to illuminate how work is done so that the impact of a new planned community doesn't negatively affect a community that's adjacent to the planning district, in this case, the MARC district. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Is there anything else you wish to say? You still have your hand up if you, Mr. Fenton? Okay, very good. We have other people online. Do we have any other people online that have anything that they wish to say? Hearing none, we'll go for a final round in the room while you guys are trying to figure out to raise your hands. I know sometimes it can be a little bit difficult online. Is there anybody that has not yet had a chance to speak here in the room? And please raise them high because I'm sort of short. And so I'm doing one of these, and you're in the back corner. All right. Lady in the front, you've already spoken, but please.
Very quick. And it's just that, when you're speaking about like new areas, new villages or whatever, I just can't help thinking about a lot of downtowns that need rejuvenating, like Windsor. And so rather than, implementing more villages and developments, and if there is money that's, for development that comes in from the state, it would be nice to work on rejuvenating what is already there instead of making new designations for villages. That's all.
Could you state your name, please, again?
Deborah.
Deborah Falls.
Yeah,
that was quick.
All right, well, thank you so much. Have we got everybody? Did we get through everybody? Anybody? I don't see any other hands online. I don't see any other hands in the public. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of what happens next. So this is the pre-application. As we mentioned at the beginning, this is really intended to be more sort of informal feedback. We're going to take this as a board probably at the next couple of meetings as Alex starts to write up and prepare our remarks, go through those, discuss those as a board, and then we'll get them back to the RPC as you continue on within your plan process. At some point, your regional planning commission is going to move forward with their plan in adoption, and then it's going to come back to us as an actual application for us to formally confirm or not confirm. And so here's me saying, this is a wonderful opportunity, and I hear many great volunteers on different planning commissions here. Thank you so much. You probably have worked with your regional planning commission in the past. Continue working with them. For those of you that are not familiar with your planning commissions, this is a wonderful opportunity to become engaged. This is really sort of designed to be a grassroots project where comes from the local planning commissions and the communities up through their regional entities to us. So this is absolutely to be continued, conversations for you all to have as we continue to look at this pre-application. And so I want you now to give you all a round of applause because this has been our highest attended one so far. And I appreciate everybody coming out on what here looks like a beautiful Friday, although I'm driving back into a snowstorm. All right, give yourself a round of applause. Well, thank you so much. And Janet, did you have anything before we signed off? All right, I'm seeing a shaking of the head.
Sorry, I
All
couldn't
right,
be there.
then we're sorry we can't have you here, but thankful you were able to attend online. I would take a motion to adjourn.
I would move to adjourn.
All right, Brooke,
I'll second.
Kirsten, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you so much. Okay, so-